Imagine this. You walk into a restaurant, and there she is, your wife, sitting across from another man, laughing like you never existed. What would you do? Confront her? Yell? Pretend you didn't see? I chose something different. I calmly placed divorce papers right between her wine glass and his. And let me tell you, the look on her face is something I'll never forget. This is my story. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear what you would have done if you were in my shoes. On the surface, our marriage looked flawless. Friends called us the golden couple, the kind you'd expect to see in lifestyle magazines, him with steady ambition, her with polished grace. We had the house, the cars, the dinner parties. But perfection is sometimes the best disguise for rot. Beneath the smiles and photo-ready moments, cracks had already begun to spread. Our conversations had turned transactional, about bills, about schedules, about appearances. Rarely about feelings and never about us. I felt it first in the silences. They weren't peaceful silences but heavy ones, loaded with things unsaid. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give clipped answers, her eyes darting back to her phone. The warmth that once colored her voice was gone, replaced by a tone that carried impatience, even irritation. She had become a stranger in familiar skin. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, wondering when the distance between us had become so wide, and whether I had done something unforgivable to cause it. I tried harder, cooked her favorite meals, surprised her with small gifts, planned weekends out. She smiled politely, but her eyes told the truth. I was an inconvenience. The truth began to unravel in fragments. A perfume scent that lingered though she claimed she'd been working late. A laugh too bright on the phone when she thought I wasn't listening. Receipts that didn't match the story she told. Small things, but enough to sharpen my suspicions. And yet, I doubted myself. That's what betrayal does. It makes you question your own reality. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was insecure. Maybe marriage simply dulled over time. But deep down I knew. One evening, I watched her from across the living room. She sat on the couch, angled away from me, her fingers dancing across her phone screen. The glow lit her face, and there it was, the softness I hadn't seen in months. She was smiling. Not at me, but at whoever was on the other end. It hit me then harder than I expected. The woman I had married, the one I had built a life with, was already gone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she turned her back to me, whispering into her phone. I didn't ask who she was talking to. The answer was already loud in the silence between us. Still, I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed more than hints and shadows. Betrayal is heavy, and I wanted proof before I let it break me. So I waited, watching more closely, noticing patterns. Late nights became later. Makeup more deliberate. Smiles more secret. And the woman I once loved with all my being was slowly slipping into a life that didn't include me. The irony was cruel. Everyone else still thought we were perfect. People envied our marriage, admired our home, praised our harmony. I played my role, nodding and smiling, while inside, I carried the weight of suspicion like a stone in my chest. In those moments, I realized that perfection is the cruelest mask. It hides decay until it's too late, until you're the last one left believing in it. And as I watched her glow in the light of someone else's attention, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the truth. I would no longer settle for shadows. Our perfect marriage was nothing more than a carefully staged illusion, and I was about to tear down the set. Suspicion can eat away at you like acid. By the time I reached the second week of noticing her strange habits, my mind was no longer at rest. I found myself replaying every detail, the quick smiles, the late-night calls, the excuses that never lined up. Still, I needed proof. One Friday evening, she told me she'd be working late again. The words slid off her tongue too easily, rehearsed. I pretended to believe her, kissed her cheek, and watched as she hurried out the door. But instead of collapsing into doubt, I grabbed my keys and followed her car. The city was alive with weekend energy, bars buzzing, neon signs flickering, couples holding hands on sidewalks. Her car wove through traffic with practiced ease until it slowed near a hotel downtown. I parked a block away, heart pounding like a war drum. I told myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she was meeting colleagues. Maybe I was about to embarrass myself. But as I lingered in the shadows of the hotel's glowing sign, the truth stepped into the light. Through the glass doors I saw her. My wife. Dressed elegantly, her face lit with that familiar glow, the glow I hadn't seen in months. And beside her, a man. His hand brushed hers, casual but intimate, the kind of gesture couples fall into when they've shared secrets and stolen nights. They laughed. They leaned close. They walked to the reception desk together. And when she slipped her arm through his, I felt my stomach twist. It was no longer suspicion. It was fact. I stood frozen, half-hidden, watching them check in. She didn't even glance over her shoulder. Why would she? I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't part of her world anymore, not the one she was building with him. The lobby lights reflected on the glass, blurring their figures like a cruel watercolor painting, but I could see enough. I could see betrayal made flesh. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Anger surged, but it wasn't the loud, violent kind. It was quiet, heavy, like a storm building in silence before it breaks. I wanted to storm inside, demand answers, humiliate them both in front of strangers. But another voice whispered, "Not yet. Not like this." So I turned and walked away. Each step away from that hotel felt like tearing skin from bone. But I carried something with me now, certainty. The lies were no longer whispers in my mind. They were living images burned into my memory. Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly at the road ahead. My chest was tight, my breath shallow. Betrayal changes something in you. It hardens the edges, reshapes the way you see love, trust, even yourself. Yet in that storm of hurt, clarity emerged. If she had already left me in her heart, then I owed it to myself to leave her in truth. Not with begging, not with rage, but with dignity and precision. That night I went home alone, the house colder than ever. I didn't wait for her. I didn't question where she was. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened a blank folder, and began typing divorce papers. The sound of keys clattering filled the room, steady and relentless. Each stroke of the keyboard was a decision made, a piece of freedom reclaimed. By the time dawn began to creep through the blinds, the documents were drafted. My hands shook as I stared at them. This wasn't just paper. It was the beginning of the end. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The morning after drafting the divorce papers, I sat at the desk staring at the stack of printed pages. The ink was still fresh, the words sharp. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Cold, clinical language, but behind every clause and paragraph was my broken heart. For hours I didn't move. Signing those documents felt heavier than any contract I had ever put my name on. My marriage wasn't perfect, but it had once been real. Now, this was all that remained, legal jargon and dotted lines. I reached for my wedding ring, twisting it around my finger until it slid off. For years, that band had been a symbol of love, of vows whispered in front of family and friends. Now it felt like a chain. I set it on top of the papers, its dull shine reflecting the finality of what I was about to do. Anger flared, then softened into sadness. I thought of the beginning, her laugh when we first met, the excitement of our wedding day, the small routines that once felt like comfort. Were those moments lies? Or had they been true once, before they rotted into betrayal? I didn't know. And maybe it didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was taking control back. I signed. One stroke of a pen, my name scrawled across the line, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't relief exactly, not yet. But it was momentum. A declaration that I would no longer be a passive victim in my own life. Still, I wasn't ready to hand them over quietly. Betrayal had a stage, and I intended to answer it on one just as public. Over the next few days, I prepared. I called a lawyer to ensure everything was airtight. I tucked the papers into a sleek folder, carried it with me like a secret weapon. Every time I felt the sting of what she'd done, I imagined the moment her world would tilt, the moment she would realize her lies had consequences. The opportunity came faster than expected. On a Tuesday evening, she dressed in haste, makeup sharp, perfume heavy. Another late meeting, another lie. I waited 10 minutes before following. My pulse was steady this time, not wild like before. Certainty gives you strange calmness. She went not to the hotel this time, but to a high-end restaurant. I parked across the street, watching her meet him at the entrance. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. She laughed, slipping her arm into his. They walked inside, oblivious to the storm approaching. I stayed in my car for a few minutes, staring at the folder on the passenger seat. My reflection in the window looked older somehow, sharper, but steadier. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about closure and justice. When I finally stepped out, the cool night air hit me like a slap of clarity. My shoes echoed on the pavement as I crossed to the restaurant. Each step carried weight, finality. I wasn't the broken man who had stood outside that hotel lobby. I was the man who had chosen to end the charade. The maitre looked up as I entered, ready to ask for a reservation. I held up the folder and said calmly, "I'm here to deliver these." He hesitated, sensing the gravity in my tone, then pointed me toward the dining area. And there, across the room, I saw them, laughing, toasting, clinking glasses like lovers in a movie. I gripped the folder tighter. The time had come. This was no longer about suspicion or even anger. It was about ending the lie on my terms. The night came sooner than I expected. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting a necklace I hadn't seen in years, slipping into a dress I knew wasn't meant for me. Her hair fell in loose waves, her lipstick perfectly drawn, her perfume filling the hallway like smoke. She caught me watching her and said casually, "Don't wait up. Might be late." I just nodded. My heart raced, but my face remained calm. She had no idea that the envelope sitting quietly inside my jacket pocket would change everything. I waited a few minutes after she left, then grabbed my keys. The drive felt endless, though I knew exactly where she was headed. I had followed her enough times to learn her habits. The same restaurant. The same lies. The same man. The city was buzzing with Friday night energy, but inside my car it was silent. My thoughts were steady, like a drumbeat. Tonight is the night. Tonight, gents. When I pulled up near the restaurant, I sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, but determined. I wasn't here to beg or to fight. I was here to finish this. I stepped out, the cool air brushing against my face, grounding me. The envelope pressed against my chest inside my jacket, sharp and undeniable. Each step toward the entrance felt heavier, but also lighter, as if I was walking out of the fog and into clarity. And then I saw them. Through the wide glass windows, she was there, seated at a table near the center. She leaned forward, laughing at something he said, her hand brushing his. The glow on her face, the sparkle in her eyes, it wasn't the woman who came home exhausted and cold. It was a version of her I hadn't seen in years, and it wasn't mine anymore. I pushed the door open. The restaurant's noise hit me, a mix of clinking glasses, quiet music, and chatter. But as I walked toward their table, it all blurred. People glanced up as I passed, maybe sensing the tension in my steps, maybe catching the steel in my eyes. She noticed me when I was just a few feet away. Her smile froze, her body stiffening as recognition set in. The man glanced up, confusion flashing across his face. I didn't say a word. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and placed it squarely on the table, right between their glasses of wine. The sound of paper meeting wood was louder than I expected, sharp enough to cut through the entire room. Conversations hushed. Forks paused midair. Her eyes widened, darting between me and the envelope. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The man shifted uncomfortably, his hand retreating from hers, his posture rigid. I looked straight at her, my voice calm, steady. "You don't need to lie anymore. It's over." That was all I said. Nothing more. Her face went pale. She reached for the envelope with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the bold letters at the top. Divorce petition. Gasps rippled from nearby tables as whispers began to spread. The man leaned back, clearly wishing he could disappear. He muttered something under his breath, but I didn't care enough to listen. I turned and walked away. No shouting. No scene. Just silence. Each step toward the exit felt like shedding a weight I had carried for too long. The air outside was cool and sharp, filling my lungs like freedom. Behind me, the restaurant returned to its rhythm, though I knew her night, and her secret, had shattered completely. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt peace. Because in that moment, I realized something profound. I hadn't just ended a marriage. I had reclaimed myself. The drive home after the restaurant showdown was unlike any I had taken before. For months, even years, the steering wheel had felt like a prison bar in my hands, dragging me from work to a house that no longer felt like home. But that night, the wheel was weightless. The hum of the engine sounded less like background noise and more like a song of liberation. I didn't rush. I let the city pass by me in blurred colors of neon and streetlights, each one a reminder that life continued outside the bubble of betrayal I had been living in. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I was curious about it. When I reached the driveway, the house loomed as it always had, our house, but not really ours anymore. I stepped inside, greeted by silence. No lingering perfume, no passive-aggressive remarks waiting for me. Just stillness. I sat on the couch, the same couch where I had once waited for her, worrying about where she was, checking the time, doubting myself. Now, there was no waiting. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, a blank slate. That night, I slept soundly. My dreams weren't haunted by suspicion or arguments. I woke up before sunrise, not out of anxiety but out of energy. I brewed coffee, stepped out to the porch, and watched the world slowly turn golden. It felt like being reborn. Over the next few days, the paperwork began to move. Lawyers, signatures, documents exchanged. It was bureaucratic, yes, but each stamp and each page signed felt like a chain breaking. She called me a few times, left messages I didn't return. Apologies mixed with anger, then silence. I didn't need to respond. Some chapters closed themselves. One evening, I ran into a neighbor who had clearly heard whispers of the restaurant scene. They asked gently, "How are you holding up?" I surprised myself by smiling. Better than I thought I would. And it was true. I started noticing things again, simple things I had stopped appreciating. The way sunlight filtered through the blinds, the taste of a well-cooked meal, the calm in a walk at dusk. When you live in betrayal, your senses dull. Everything feels gray. Now, colors were coming back into my life. But it wasn't just about peace. It was about rediscovery. I pulled out my old guitar, the one gathering dust in the corner. I started playing again, my fingers clumsy at first, but the music returning little by little. I called friends I hadn't spoken to in months, people I had pushed away because I was too busy hiding my broken marriage. Their laughter reminded me what connection really felt like, not the hollow performance I had been trapped in. And slowly I began to forgive, not her, but myself. Forgive myself for staying too long, for doubting my instincts, for thinking love meant tolerating disrespect. Forgive myself for carrying guilt that wasn't mine. That was the hardest part. Weeks later, I found myself driving by that same restaurant. I didn't go inside, but I parked across the street for a moment. From the outside, it looked the same. Couples still laughed, waiters still hurried, glasses still clinked. Life didn't stop for my heartbreak. And that was the point, it never would. I realized then that endings aren't walls. They're doorways. Yes, I had closed the door on a marriage, on lies, on betrayal. But I had also stepped through into something else, something wider, freer, untold. People often say heartbreak destroys you. But that's only half true. Heartbreak strips you. It tears away illusions, comfort zones, the lies you wanted to believe. It leaves you raw. But in that rawness, you're real. You get to choose who you'll be without the weight. And that choice, was simple. I would not let betrayal define me. Months from now, maybe I'll fall in love again. Maybe I won't. That part doesn't scare me anymore. Because I'm no longer searching for validation in someone else's eyes. I'm building it in my own reflection. As I sat back in my car that night, staring at the restaurant one last time, I whispered to myself, This isn't the end. This is the beginning I should have given myself long ago. And for the first time, I believed it.